Hello and welcome. This is Tia Kelly. I'm going to be your host for the next 40 minutes for this incredible Epic Oracle interview with a dear friend of mine, Loretta. She's been with me for a really long time on my journeys of growth and contribution. So she and I met in 2008, I believe it was, and we traveled all over the world together and created something called Global Sorority, which is an initiative that helps young women to discover and hone their internal leadership development skills and bring those to their communities, and it changes their lives through a program called Elements of Success, which Loretta created. And we also created a documentary series while we were doing all that together to find out from girls what it is that they really need in their lives, from themselves, from us, from their communities, and how leadership development can affect them positively and affect their communities. So that's what we've been doing together for these last years. And on this last journey that Loretta's going to tell us about today, she went to the Northwest Territories to work with Indigenous youth of Canada. And I didn't get to go on that trip, and it's the first one where we haven't gone together. And so I'll be hearing about it for the first time, and you'll be hearing about it for the first time as well. So Loretta, I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing with us about your most recent adventure.
Yeah, thank you. So as Tia said, we've been working together for a long time, and so I'm really excited to be part of this podcast and share a bit of the journey that I've been in the last little while. As Tia mentioned, we've been working together in around leadership development, and as a change management specialist and leadership developer, I've done a lot of work with people from all over the world, but some of the most rewarding has been with young women through the nonprofit organization that I've been running for the last 9.5 years. And was lucky enough to meet Tia in 2008 while we were doing some coaching training, and found some synergies in the way that we work in the world and things that we're passionate about and driven by. And together we created Global Sorority, which is that initiative that Tia talked about that really looks at, what are the challenges that young women face in the world, but more specifically, how do we support them in creating and bringing out those inner geniuses within themselves so that they can actually find and create the success that they want for themselves, and defining it, more importantly, in a way that's important to them, so that they feel that inner success and that confidence in order to create the dreams and the confidence that they need to keep moving forward in life.
Yeah, which is obviously really important for all of us to be able to have that and do that. But if you can catch girls young in their development and give them those tools early on, it makes a huge difference for the rest of their lives. And we often speak with women, right, who say when they hear about the program or if they get to sit in on any of it, that they wish they would have had that as well when they were that age. Because, a lot of us didn't learn all that stuff until we were in our 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s. There's no, you can learn at any point, but if you can catch them young like that, it's such an amazing gift to instill in them at that age. So yeah, Loretta's work has been phenomenal and amazing and changed a lot of lives. And I've been happy to be a part of that and sharing that with her. So tell us a little bit more about you, and then how you kind of got started on this road. And then I want to launch into your latest adventure.
Yeah. So, there's lots of videos out there about my story and kind of, what I do and why I do what I do, which is the most important. And as a young adolescent girl, I kind of felt torn between two worlds, and the world that, I was brought up in, that was based on my family's culture and belief systems, and the world that I grew up in, which is the world that was much different than the one that I was being raised in. And so there was a conflict that I had as an adolescent that nobody helped me to define, and that was who I was. And in amongst these two pieces of culture, and one of the culture was very much about community, and the other part was very much about I and how I can, rise to the top and create success and where I want to go. And so the difference between the two worlds didn't often collide in a positive way. And so I was lucky at a very young age to have some people in my life that started asking me some of the most important questions about who I was, and helped me to transform a little bit about who I was, but more importantly, transform the way I was thinking about myself and what I had capable of doing and what I could do moving forward in my life. And through a number of different circumstances that were quite tragic, through death and addiction and, all of these things that had happened. I realized at one point that it was important for me to look at why this was happening to me. Rather from a victim standpoint, like why me, poor me, these terrible things are happening. Perhaps there was something bigger and greater for me to achieve in the world because of all this, because of the strength that it gave me, because the understanding that it gave me, the empathy that it gave me, the heart that it opened up within me, and I could see things in people that perhaps other people didn't see. And I could also see solutions because of some of those women that stepped up to ask me some of those questions. And when I realized very quickly, I think I was about 19, 20, when I realized that there was a purpose for this, I started to look at what can I do with it. And through a number of different pieces, and if you hop onto my TEDx talk, you can hear more about the story and the different pieces. I can save that for another time. But I created a nonprofit organization to help girls to discover those parts of themselves that were, that people weren't asking them the questions that I had been not only asking myself, but these wonderful women had asked me along the way. Mm-hmm. And that's how kind of Passion Foundation, which is the organization that I created originally, that's how it came to birth. And through that, child and youth care counseling, I got into coaching, I got into consulting, I got into teaching, I got into facilitation, and I developed the elements of success very early on when I decided that I was going to create this organization, which is a 14-hour program that success is actually an acronym. So the first S is self-exploration. Who am I in the world? Right? Very simple. Who am I? Simple. I say simple, but it's actually probably one of the hardest pieces. The next one is understanding. The U is for understanding that limitations are self-imposed. And that when we say I can't, we really can't. No matter what anybody says, if we believe it and we own it, it becomes ours. The next part is C, which is the courage to change those belief systems and step into a new way of being in the world. And then from there, we can start looking at cooperation. So now that I have a better sense of myself, I can have a better sense of community. With community, I can then start to evaluate skills. Like, what is it that I actually need to become very successful in the world? Learning those skills, and the last S is service. So what we do, what T and I do, and the volunteers that we work with do, is we walk girls through that process. We walk them through, from who you are to what you can contribute into the world in a powerful way, based on the things that are most important to you, to your community, and the way that you're moving forward. So it's a pretty powerful process to walk through. And it's a lot of deep work at a very early start in life, which makes for unbelievable transformation. And so that's my night job, or my day job, my morning job, my all over.
One of your other jobs.
My other jobs. So I do that. And then I also have the privilege of working with various communities, government, non-government organizations, and individuals looking to make transformation. So I support large corporate initiatives. For example, right now with the City of Vancouver, I work on large corporate initiatives that are set out by City Council and helping leaders in the city to transform. I also work with corporate clients to help them develop their leadership. And then I work with individuals to help them to transform their leadership to a new way of being. So everything kind of fits between leadership development and change management. Just different spectrums, because I get bored very easily. I like a good challenge. And it's been an unbelievably incredible path. And this last year, one of the reasons why Tia invited me to do this podcast was about my last journey that I just took. Two of them, actually, which was very fortunate. One of them was in the Northwest Territories, which was very sad that Tia didn't get an opportunity to come with us. Yeah, Andrea Andrea Gilbert is our amazing filmmaker and producer that has joined us for the last year, two years now. Yeah, 2 years. And we were both looking at each other on the flight. We're like, we're missing our other piece. We're missing the leg to our stool. And so it was a much different experience. It was a very intense experience. But it was working with the First Nations community, a small town called Fort Liard, which is a town of about 650 people up north. It takes about 2.5 hour drive from the nearest airport, and down the Alaska Highway. So I can take that off of my list, that I've taken a drive down the Alaska Highway as well.
I didn't know that was on your list.
Yeah, it was one of the ones of heading up that way. And taking a drive. So we, and I even got to cross some buffalo on the way. And
I saw those photographs. Those were really cool, really beautiful.
Yeah, it was really amazing.
I have another question about that really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, what was I going to ask you? It'll come back to me. Something about going up that way. Oh, a big part of doing the filming up there, and I know it was a big hope of Andrea's, that you guys would get to see some northern lights. Was that part of the equation? Wrong time of year?
No, it was so funny. It's the right time of year, except we were like, it happens to me in most places I go in the world. I'm 2 weeks off. So 2 weeks before, the teacher was saying it was the most spectacular view, and she showed us these pictures, and we were like, oh, wow. And she says, yeah, the next few nights are supposed to be pretty clear. Her husband, the teacher husband is an RCMP officer, and he was working night shifts. So she was saying, she's like, okay, so I'm going to tell Mark if he sees them to come knock on you guys' door to pick you up, to go take you to go see him in the best spot. So one night, it was early, and he comes. I get an email first or text message that says, "Mark's coming to get you. They're starting to come out." And we're like, Andrew and I get all excited. And, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. We're dressing up. We're putting layers on because it's so cold out. We get into the RCMP truck. I should maybe not say that. We get into the truck because he picks us up. He takes us to the spot. And there is nothing. So we waited in the cold, and we're like, maybe there's something. He's like, no, they're up there. And I'm like, yeah, and he's like, I think I might've been premature. And I'm like, I think you might have been premature. So the next few nights we're waiting and hoping that we might see some northern lights. And lo and behold, we didn't.
Okay.
So that was also on my bucket list that I'll need to have to go up again. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I was just wondering about that because I knew that was going to be an exciting element to happen. Yeah. And if anybody hasn't seen the Northern Lights, then you can just go on the internet and check out how amazing. It's like a laser light show in the sky. It's really quite something. So maybe we'll get to do that together next time.
That would be wonderful. I have seen them before, just not on this trip here. And I tell you, it would have been really phenomenal to have that experience. However, we did have so many other incredible experiences while being there. So. Okay.
So just a little preface here. Yeah. So Loretta's been teaching the Elements of Success program for how many years?
9.5.
Okay. 9.5 years. In Canada, there's a large Indigenous population throughout the country, Canada, also here in the United States, but I feel like Canada has a really deep history and a lot of different tribes all over. And you've worked with First Nations youth before using the program. It's super impactful for some reason, and I want you to talk about that, why it is so helpful to them. What about this is kind of paramount to you and I were talking a little bit when we take this program, not within North America, but we take it to, a developing nation, how it's different and how those kind of tie in with the Indigenous youth and explain that a little bit. And then just talk specifically about the groups that you're working with this time.
Yeah. So it's been what a ride this last little month has been on a number of different levels for me, especially around the next level of the organization. So we changed our mandate just recently. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that because it ties into the reasoning why this has so much impact. So when I started the Passion Foundation, which is now called Passion to Lead, I had a focus on young women and doing leadership development because there was actually at that point in time, no leadership development program specifically for young women to help them through coaching to come from the inside out into the world. A lot of it was how do I become bigger, stronger? How do I run a business? How do I, go to school? All of those types of things, but it really wasn't an inside out approach. Mm-hmm. And so I had tried to partner with other organizations, but they weren't really seeing the same vision that I was seeing. And so I just created it, even though I tried hard to make those partnerships, it didn't happen. And then about a few years ago, I started to realize that although we were doing really powerful work and we would see large transformation with these young women that we work with, their counterparts, the males, so their peers, were not receiving the same education and information. And as a result, we'd often go into communities, TNI, and they're like, do you have anything for boys? What about the boys? You're not doing anything for boys. And we're like, no, we really focus on young women because young women have the most amount of the challenges in the world, because of history, because of a number of different things. And so we focus here, although we do see the need. And the need has just become greater and greater. Many of you will have seen young boys in your community that have become more aware of their emotions, unsure of what to do with them, more issues around anxiety and depression, lack of communication skills, lack of motivation. You will see some of that decline while you see the women becoming more inspired, more motivated, more, driven to create changes in the world. And so all of a sudden, again, when the pendulum swings, you have an imbalance, or I should say imbalance, because we've gone from here all the way over to the other side. And so I proposed to the board that we go, we again do something that's ahead of what society is seeing right now, and start implementing a boys program. So same program for boys. And so we did that. We renamed the organization. And in Indigenous communities, especially in North America, and as Tia mentioned, in Canada, we have such a huge population of Indigenous tribes, of bands. Often the young women have, I think the statistic is 75% of young women, Indigenous young women under the age of 18, have experienced sexual abuse or physical violence. That's 75% of a population that is exposed to extreme violence, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And that includes another counterpart that's contributing to that. And so this trip to the Northwest Territories was one of probably the hardest and the most rewarding of the two, because we implemented our first boys program. And we started them off together, the boys and the girls, and then we separated them. So we had the girls in one group and the boys in another, but then they came together for their community projects at the very end, their service work. And just a little bit of background about, because of residential schools and because of the generational disconnect from culture, the amount of challenges that are faced by this community are it's hard. It's hard to talk about. Like, it's really the things that these children experience, no child should ever have to experience. Both boys and girls alike. There actually is no difference. The additional challenge is because the isolation of these types of communities that are farther in the north or separated from urban Indigenous cultures and youth, is that the isolation and the lack of resources, the lack of education, the lack of opportunity in these small communities is it's terrible. It's beautiful and it's terrible, because they're preserved in a natural sense in some way, but they also don't have those additional help and support. So for often these kids in this particular one town that we went, if it wasn't for those teachers and those community workers that were up there, that get stationed up there for short periods of time, those kids would really have nothing in regards to helping them to change and shift the generational piece. And one of the things that Tia said is the power of the elements of success for Indigenous communities, and why it's so powerful. And it goes back to my own story, is because they have a firm understanding of we. So that sense of community, that sense of oneness, that sense of connectedness, they have that. They have no sense of I.
Which is often what we see in the developing world.
Yeah, because in a culture, we go back to everything is about I. How can I achieve this? How can I do this? How can I move here? I'm a victim of this. I'm a succeeder of this. I.
In the Western culture.
Yeah, in the Western culture. But there's no real glue around that. And so why the elements of success is so powerful is because it really operates from, it takes the best of we and the best of I and brings those together to create the transformation and the change. And so if I empower myself, I automatically, maybe I should back up. If I am in a community, and then I'll use this particular story in just a moment, that was extremely powerful. But if I live in a community where I is not part of my vocabulary, we is, and I learn that I am important within the we, I automatically jump to giving back to we. I feel better. I'm more empowered. I'm going to give back to my community, right? Versus if I'm already empowered, I have a sense of I I'm just raising I and I'm going. I'm not necessarily always giving that back, right? Mm-hmm. And so years ago, 2008, there was a young woman that I provided these tools to, same kind of situation experiences that these youth up north had. And within 2 years, supported 2,000 young women to stay sexually safe and in school, because she got to raise I and then automatically wanted to give it back to we.
Because she was already so connected to the we.
Yeah.
Before she figured out how the I was going to contribute to that. So do you think it's easier then, and I'm not going to, maybe not easy is probably not the right word, but for somebody who's really steeped in community, understands the we, understands contribution, understands community, to tap into the I and then have the whole picture, is that easier versus somebody who has been taught all about the I, and how to connect that to community?
Yeah, so it's not, I don't think it's easier or harder. I think it's equally difficult when they're separated. Mm-hmm. However, the results are much different. So when somebody's connected to we first and then I, the spread of possibility ripples faster. When somebody is connected to I but not we, the spread happens. It just happens on a slower front, right? So I can give you a really good example of the youth in the Northwest Territories. You know, they show up, they have no real sense of I. They show up, and often they're showing up not fed properly. Some of those kids came back, you know, the next day, because we ran them consecutively back to back, which is a lot of information and downloading and personal work and leadership development to do. But they would come back, you know, and I catch them like dozing off, and I said, well, you know, what's going on that you didn't get enough sleep last night? You know, they were drinking last night and they were just loud and there was violence. And so these kids would go home. They go home from school to this environment, not sleeping properly, not eating properly, coming back to school and trying to learn, but coming back because they want so badly to have something that they're still coming back. I mean, we had the success rate, even though every single challenge those kids faced, we had an 85% completion rate.
Cool. Yeah. And
you know, that says something, right?
Yeah, that is something. So, and you've worked with kids who have more privileges, more safety nets, a little bit more connection, and they wouldn't necessarily show up as religiously. And when we go to places like India and Africa, where the resources are very slim, and just getting there is a big deal, and the turnout rate and the show up rate and the stick-to-itiveness is really high. So it's just something that's always stood out to me.
Yeah, it's really, and what they created, like, so, okay, so just to paint for everybody, anybody who's listening or watching this, just to paint a bit of a picture. So these kids are between the ages of 11 and 15. Most of them alcoholic families that they're living in, even though it's a fairly dry community, it happens. Extreme violence. No real understanding no full understanding of what is right or wrong in a different sense. It's more of a primal survival way of being. It becomes normal because they don't see anything outside of that picture. Not enough nutrition. Not a lot of hope in a lot of ways. And things like fetal alcohol syndrome and fetal alcohol effects. And then in addition to that, you have the additional challenges of chromosomal changes or deformalities from inbreeding, from incest. And so you have all of these different components, intellectual, mental, but you have spirit. When that spirit, and Tia, you and I have seen this, is that the first few modules are kind of dead to the world, right? They're not really engaged. They're not talking a whole lot. They're kind of confused on what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then by the end of it, you can't get them to stop talking, and they're kind of interacting and having ideas and all kinds of stuff. So at the very end, I pulled all the kids together, the boys and the girls, the very last day, and I told them how important and how loved they were. I told them how much I seen them grow over the week and how valuable they are to their community. And I just reiterated all the messages and all the insights that I had watched from them over the week. And I was getting quite teary telling them this because I could tell half of them didn't believe it, you know? And I said, you are so important to this world because you are the future of this world. And so how you choose to show up and what you choose to do and how you choose to do it matters. It really matters. And it was so interesting because they're all bouncing off the walls and whatever with that language, they just stopped. All of them stopped. And I said, listen, in the next half hour, I want you to write on the board every problem that you see in your community. And I want you to write out solutions, things that you think that we can do to make a change together as a team, as a community. Now that you're more empowered with the information and that you know what we're going to do. Within half an hour, they had 9 ideas on the board. And I sat back and I was like, okay, everybody come back. Let's take a look at all this. Sorry, I'm getting all teary now. And I said, let's have a voting system. And let's narrow it down. So you get to vote as many times as you want. And we're going to narrow it down until we get maybe 1 or 2 or 3 projects. So they had everything from let's have a soccer team to let's clean up our community to let's make more sock monkeys because we take sock monkeys with us sometimes when we go, and the kids got to make sock monkeys as part of their art therapy through their leadership. They had planting a community garden, doing an elders partner program. So they would partner with the elders and they work in the gardens together in the spring and the summer, and they had all these beautiful ideas. And then they narrowed it down to 2. One of them they decided to call the Green Mile, and it was to clean up their community when the snow would melt, so that 2 days a week they would go around and pick up garbage, so that when people come into their town, because it is quite a tourist transitional place, that they were proud when people would come through their community. And the second one, which resulted in me taking a puppy home, a rescue dog, was that most dogs end up dying up there as puppies. So they either die of parvo or they get killed by wild dogs.
And it's also freezing, right? I mean, they're out.
And it's freezing. Oh, yeah. And it's so bad that the RCMP officer is saying that the wolves don't even come into town anymore because the wild pack of dogs in town keeps them out. So, I mean, that tells you. So the kids were very concerned about the health and well-being of the dogs, and that people often take the puppies because they're cute, but don't take care of them when they're adults. And so then they often get sick, and in a number, they chain them up and all kinds of stuff happens. So they wanted to open, and I should probably preface this too, is that the nearest shelter was 2.5 hours drive away and often was overpopulated. I'm going to shift myself here. So they decided that they were going to they wanted to open up by the summer, build their own little animal shelter. They wanted to contact companies to get parvo medication so that the dogs could make sure that they were vaccinated when they were born, to see if they could get veterinary students to come to their town to spay and neuter the dogs up there. And they would like some training so that they could train the dogs so they would behave themselves. And then have food. So they wanted to write the food companies to see if they would donate food so that the dogs would have food at their little shelter that they would build. Keep in mind that these kids, remember the restrictions, the challenges that these kids face on a daily basis. And here's what they're thinking about. They're thinking about a cleaner, more presentable community and environment. And they're thinking about helping them something outside of themselves, even though they themselves don't have much, if anything. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, this is like, it's such a beautiful process to witness. And so we always have community mentors. And so we sat down, myself, the teacher, the community counselor, and the community youth worker, sat down, broke the teams into 4 or to 3. And then I teach them project management. So we started walking through the project management template that I've got, name their project and what does it look like. And the animal shelter group called themselves the Littlest Pet Shot Rescue Society. Oh God, it's just too cute. These kids are too cute. So, here's the most wonderful thing about it. When you have strong community women, believe it or not, these women, they're always community women that are helping these kids out. The kids have already, so I was up there the second week of November. So it's been a month. It's been a month. And they've already raised $200. They've already done a fundraiser in their community doing arts and crafts and raised $200 that they can put aside towards their dog shelter.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
You know?
Yeah. Do they have like a little online, like, is there any way to donate to them or anything like that? Do they have a platform that's up that's like Fund Us or something like that? GoFundMe or something?
Go find the GoFundMe. Yeah. So I had mentioned that to the teacher. They are quite overwhelmed with the amount of work that they have up there, you know, because their jobs are they're not just teaching jobs like most teachers. You know, they do a lot more. And so on top of this, it's a little extra work for them. So I have suggested some things that we can do to support them. Like I promised the kids that if they continue to decide to move forward with their Green Mile project, that I would see if we can get some t-shirts sponsored for them. And they would have the Green Mile t-shirts. They would have to decide the logo, and then we'd have those made for them. And then I also suggested that if they have any traditional arts and crafts up there that the kids make, that we can look at posting them online through my Etsy shop. We can do that. And then potentially do a GoFundMe account so that we can start raising some funds for them.
Yeah, cool. That would be really neat. Okay, so that is a beautiful takeaway. Their community project coming together. I've always wanted to see that, so I'm doubly sad that I missed it, like having the girls and the boys coming together for the community project. Must have been really powerful. And yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so you did that. You get home, you go back to work full time. You have all this stuff going, and because she has another business. So or a couple other businesses, Healing Hamsa, which makes beautiful jewelry, yeah, and malas, and then she does coaching and works for the city, and you know, she's got all this stuff going on. Leaders for Humanity is a whole nother branch of what she does. So much. So anyway, she gets home, dives back into all of that, and then a couple of weeks later, you go off to another rural community in freezing cold, middle of nowhere, to work with another group. Again, boys and girls, or just girls?
No, boys and girls. So I did took my Leaders for Humanity. I have the adult program, so the Fundamentals of Effective Leadership. So I did a program. I was hired by the government up there to run a program for the Indigenous adults in their community, and then also the youth in their community, which is a wide range of backgrounds. And we did boys and girls. So we always have, you know, a lower amount of boys. But this program, what I did is I actually did them together. So I just did not have the capacity or the time to do them separate. So I thought, here's an opportunity to see if it works, if the boys and girls can come together and do this reflective work and this development work together. And they can. So probably not as deep as some of the other programs can go. You can hear my puppy. He's just crying.
Okay, so
I'll grab him in a little second. But,
yeah, finish your story. We're going back to how you ended up leaving the middle of nowhere with a puppy.
With a puppy. Oh yeah, that's quite the story too. So we did the program with the boys and the girls, and it's not, we didn't get to go into as depth because we only had 10 hours over the week to work with the youth. Unfortunately, and by the time the school bus came in, grabbed all the kids, brought them in, we got them fed because, you know, they need to eat and then get going. But they did create a couple projects out of it still, and it was really interesting to see that one of the projects, they wanted a Tim Hortons in their community. You'll laugh, for those of you in the United States who don't know, Tim Hortons is like is our Canadian version of Starbucks. Our donuts, yeah, Dunkin' Donuts, but it's a nicer, fancier place. And, it's a Canadian tradition, right? You go for Tim Hortons coffee and you grab a donut, or you grab their chili or their soup or whatever, and it's been around for a long time. And so Tim Hortons in smaller communities are often the way that youth work. That's the way that they get jobs because it's like a fast food kind of joint. And so it allows them to have more jobs. And up there, the closest Tim Hortons is 2 hours away. And they have Facebook has these bidding sites. What are they called?
I don't know.
Or whatever it is. Yeah. So a box of donuts from Tim Hortons goes for $25 on this bid war site. That's how popular and how how much success they feel like Tim Hortons will have. So their business plan, because they want more jobs and they want a safe place to hang out, that was the other place. And so their job is to write a letter to a Tim Hortons franchisor to tell them why it's important for them to open a franchise in their community. So we walked through the letter, and it was fascinating because these boys had these silly ideas about what it should look like. And even though they had some intelligent ideas in and around that, but the girls were like, we need to focus on here. We need to get going. Like, where's the template? I'm a very good writer. Can I just take this home and do this and bring this back to everybody? And then like, it was really interesting watching the dynamic shift where the boys were more lackadaisical about, how do we move forward with this? And here's our ideas. And the girls were like, hey, let's move forward. Let's get this done.
Leadership in action.
Yeah. It was really interesting. And then the other project that they created was, which is really interesting. They wanted a series of art classes led by different artisans in their community that were offered by donation, and that and then the participants would be able to then at the end of the series showcase their artwork.
Very cool.
So they were working diligently on that, and so I told them in a couple of weeks I'll check back and just see where they're at. The challenge is the woman who is our mentor in that community is 8 months pregnant, and so we'll be going on mat leave, and also has just what an incredible woman she is, Laura Grizzly Paws. But she has just been accepted to her PhD, and so she's going to be off doing her thing in that. And so I'm going to have to look at how we can find another mentor and work with Laura to ensure that these kids are continuously supported moving forward.
Keep supporting their little missions that they create. And that is important. When you raise somebody's vibration that much, you give them so much inspiration, and they tap into their leadership and they come together to create something, and then they don't have the support to do it. And I think we've all been there. We've all gotten jazzed up about an idea, wanted to start a business, wanted to do something, and then just didn't have that person to kind of keep us going, hold our hand, or get us through the scary parts, or ask us the right questions, or whatever. So we all know what that feels like. And when you're dealing with little kids who also have challenges, the really important aspect is to keep them connected and keep them moving along afterwards. So
So we're looking at how we can kind of do that moving forward. So, but again, really brilliant ideas. Again, the natural difference between the male and female around that age range. They were a little bit older. They were 13 to 18. But still the same thing where the girls were like, hey, let's get serious about this. And the guys like, hey, this is kind of cool. And let's be creative about this. And let's think about this in different ways. And let's, it's almost like a role reversal, which is really interesting when you think about the feminine and the masculine energy, where the women are like, let's play, let's create with this. Let's, nurture, let's see and the men are like, hey, let's just do this.
Yeah.
So it's almost like when we're talking about energy level or energy, the yin and the yang, you're almost looking at it's a bit of a role reversal, which is kind of interesting. So, yeah,
that is interesting because a lot of times when women do step into leadership, they step into a masculine version of leadership, which works to get shit done, but it's not super sustainable for them, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, as they continue on. So, being strong leaders, getting stuff done, and staying in your feminine is quite an art. And I'm sure with all these great tools and leadership skills they're getting early, that they'll have a jump on that, as they move forward.
Yeah, but it's interesting. It doesn't, in that role, I've met a lot of women in leadership positions. It also doesn't earn them the respect that they're actually looking for. It earns them the status, it earns them the achievement, it helps them to climb the ladder and all those things. But when they aren't authentic to their own energy in that way, they're not necessarily showing up for people. And people are the ones that are carrying out their work. And so the inspiration and motivation from staff, from a woman who's not stepping into both her masculine and her feminine energy appropriately, I get it's way more work. Mm-hmm. They're not getting as much buy-in and support from the people in and around them, which is creating a deeper level of frustration on a more, foundational or intrinsic level for the woman who's the leader, because her goal is natural instinct is to be that person who is not only going to rise, but also to bring people along. And the amount of women leaders that I've worked with that suffer from anxiety or depression on a very quiet level, and afraid to own it because that means that I'm not the success that I had that I worked so hard to get towards. It's a tricky place to be. It's a tricky place to be.
Yes. and that will, I feel like it is working itself out. There's
Mhm.
lots of facets to it though, you know, like it takes a societal shift as well about what we're expecting from women in that place, you know,
Yeah.
in that place of leadership. You know,
Yeah.
she really just showed up fully in her feminine. I think a lot of people, you know, at this stage in corporations would be like, huh? Wouldn't quite get it. So it's a slow grow, but I do think women are making huge strides in combining masculine and feminine energies and staying authentic to themselves and their own path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And everything is an evolution. I keep telling, people on a number of different levels, and we have these discussions about, the dynamics of the world right now and leadership in the world right now. Everything is about evolution. Everything is about a pendulum swinging, and everything is about polarities. And so in order for, evolution to happen, shifts have to happen, right? Evolution doesn't naturally, like, one thing has to go one way and then the other way. It's that pendulum back and forth, right? I'm going to grab Charlie because he is just, and then I will tell you the quick story about how Charlie is my little dog angel. Here, let me grab him. Hold on. Okay. So.
Charlie. Charlie.
Okay.
Oh,
So this is Charlie.
Hi, buddy.
So Charlie, interesting enough, my other dog, Lucy, who's down below, she cannot see Tootie. Charlie can. So if you actually talk to Charlie, he can actually...
Hi, buddy. What a good boy.
So Charlie has grown tremendously big. So Charlie, interesting because these kids, Lucy wants to come up to open this. Okay, Lucy, come up too. Okay, so now we've got two dogs here. I don't know if you can see here. Lucy, can you say hi?
Okay, hi,
Lucy. Lucy can't necessarily see everybody, but so these are my fur children. So Charlie was the RCMP 20 minutes before my flight said, or the night before, he said, I'll pick you up in the morning. I'm going to show you these dogs that these kids are talking about. And takes me to this litter of 8. And I was like, oh my goodness, there are these fluffy, cute little, 7, 8-week-old puppies running around, dirty, smelly, lack of food that may not make it. They most likely will not make it. And so he's like, what do you think? And I was like, so I said, okay, well, I have a girl already, so I need a boy because too many females in the house sometimes could be a bit crazy. So I need a boy, and I'm going to grab the smallest. So we turned them all over. There were 2 boys. One was Charlie, and the other was his brother. And 20 minutes before I'm taking a 2.5-hour drive, I am coasting this little fur ball inside my jacket who's dirty and smelly. Andrea's laughing when she comes back. She's like, you really grabbed one. I was like, yeah, I really grabbed one. So I get to the airport. So first we get in the truck, and our driver's name is Charlie, by the way. So he's an elderly man that drives back and forth every day, 2.5 hours to get groceries and things like that for people, because there's no real grocery store in Fort Liard. So he does daily runs into Fort Nelson. So we get in the truck, and Charlie looks at me, and he's like, is that a dog that you have? And I was like, yes. He says, so you come here to work with kids and you're taking a dog home? And I was like, yes. He's like, okay. So we get into town. I was like, do you mind if we stop? And I got to grab a collar, some food or something for this guy. So we do a quick little stop in town, takes us to the airport. I have this little puppy with me that's all of maybe 4 pounds. And the flight attendant's like, you can't take that on the flight with you. And I was like, so first she goes, is that a dog? And I was like, yes. And she's like, you can't take him on the flight with you. And I said, ma'am, he was going to die if I didn't take him. I've just driven 2.5 hours with this little thing he's got to come with me. And she's like, no, I'm telling you, he can't come with you. You have to have a crate for him. You have to have, I was like, I got nothing. I had literally picked him up from a little hole and he came. So she's like, let me just call the local rescue and see if they have something that you can put him in. And I'm a very spiritual person. So I spend a lot of time in my spirituality and very much time in my understanding that if things are to happen, they happen in the world. So I turned to Andrea, I looked at her, and then I was like, okay, angels, if this is meant to be, he's coming with us. And if it's not meant to be, just let it be, right? What can I do? I'm not going to fight. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. It's been a challenging week. I have a dirty, stinky little puppy. Maybe I can figure another way to get him there. If it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. Not even 2 minutes later, this lady walks up and she says, excuse me. She says, I overheard your conversation. I apologize. I was eavesdropping, but boy, is he cute. She said, I think I have a cat carrier at home that he would fit in. Let me see him. So she takes a look at him. And she says, I think so. I can go home and get it for you. So this kind, generous, lovely human being who I've never met in my entire life hops in her truck from the airport, drives all the way home, comes back 10 minutes before my flight with a cat carrier that is regulation size, that Charlie fits inside, even puts a little blanket inside for him. I pay my $50 and Charlie sleeps the whole flight. So, sometimes.
That's awesome. And you could have lost it. So that's a good, a good lesson for us all to really just stay connected with your best and highest good and be in a place of acceptance energetically and just really open to possibilities. Like all of those things, you stayed in that energy and look how that unfolded. Whereas you could have just freaked out and went into a tailspin. And he's so cute. He's really dark. So the metering is kind of like missing some of him, but he's so cute.
He's like a little bear. They call him Bear. It's so funny. I called him Chief Charlie because he came from a reserve. So I thought respectful thing. The guy was a survivor. He's calling him Chief Charlie. Charlie for the driver, Chief, because he came from the reserve. And my nephew thought his name was Captain Charlie. So my 6-year-old nephew kept going, Captain Charlie, Captain Charlie. It was so cute. But yeah, so now I'm this guy's probably going to be about 70, 80 pounds.
Yeah.
He's going to be a big boy. He's got pretty big paws for a little 11-week-old puppy. But for the most part of his cheekiness and his puppiness, he's very sweet.
Cool. Beautiful, happy ending. Thank you, Loretta, for being here, for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Are there any last words you'd like to share with anybody who might be watching this?
I think it's funny. I do a lot of speaking and a lot of talking about my journey, my story, the work that we do. It takes me a while sometimes to be able to share this stuff because I really sit and integrate it. Like for me, it's a very deep process to walk with people on this journey, especially with ones that are challenged. But if anything I can say is that no matter what barrier you might be facing in this world, no matter what challenges you might have faced in the past, no matter what circumstances are presently residing in your world, you have what it takes to create something different. Mm-hmm. And if you invest the time and the energy into that space, you will be absolutely amazed at what shows up. And I have gratitude for my life every day, because, although I've been through a number of challenges, the rewards of doing the work, are so great and so powerful. And just keep going. Reach out to Tia. She's an incredible, and I probably shouldn't do this at the end of something like this, but Tia is an absolutely incredible coach. And the tools that she's providing to the world right now are something that I know that for myself and many that I know have made a huge impact. So thank you, Tia, for having me. Thank you for creating what you create in the world and giving me the space to share the story and the journey and walking it with me, man.
Not this last one. And, people are like, nicely timed, Tia. You go to all these places where it's warm and then they go where it's like freezing cold and you just happen to miss that one. It's
funny how that happens, right? I'm pregnant, sorry.
Oh, dear. Okay, love you, lady. Thank you
for
what you do in the world. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.